I'm in one of the Udacity tablet studios. Anytime you see this pen, you are actually watching a video that's taking place right here. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Unfortunately, we can't teach you everything there is to know about the world of web development. At some point, you'll be on your own and you'll need to learn some new technique or technology. So instead of focusing directly on teaching you everything that you could ever know, we want to make sure that you're ready to be independent. We want you to be able to figure out new techniques and technologies on your own and thrive in whatever the web dev world becomes. So, to start all of that off, I want to go back to the very beginning. Some of you may recognize this. This is Netscape Navigator, and it was the first major web browser. It was released in 1994, and it was based on the earlier Mosaic browser, which was developed by the University of Illinois back in 1993. Of course, Navigator peaked in popularity in the 90s, and eventually Microsoft's Internet Explorer came to dominate the web browser landscape. Development on Navigator stopped, but you can still trace features and code in older versions of Internet Explorer and Mozilla's Firefox all the way back to Netscape Navigator. In fact, Netscape Navigator looks pretty similar to the browsers that we still have today. There's a URL bar at the top and then a big viewport to consume content. Nowadays, web developers use 3 different languages to develop websites. HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and JavaScript, which, well, I guess just stands for JavaScript. In a nutshell, HTML describes the content and structure of a website, CSS describes the styling of a website, and JavaScript handles all the interactions. You'll be learning all about these 3 languages in the lessons to come. However, this situation with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript hasn't always been the case. The early web was almost entirely all text documents, with maybe a couple images, kind of like newspapers. As a result, the first browsers only supported HTML. CSS and JavaScript didn't exist yet. Believe it or not, this is the first website. The web wasn't originally designed for big applications like Facebook and Gmail. It was developed as a way for text documents to directly link to one another. You can see all the links on this page. The links were meant to mimic references that you would find in bibliographies or annotations in research papers. In fact, the academic route should be pretty obvious because this website is from CERN, which is the nuclear institute in Europe. At the time, these links were really nothing more than ways of referencing other people's work. Check it out. This was the first Microsoft homepage. Over time, developers started adding styles to their content, changing colors and fonts and backgrounds and a little bit of layout. All of these changes ended up in the HTML, and the code was a huge mess. Now you're looking at the Yahoo homepage around the year 2000. This image is actually courtesy of the Internet Archive Wayback Machine, which is a kind of hilarious way to check out older websites if you want to see how the web used to look. Anyway, CSS came on the scene around 1996 as developers really wanted to add more and more and more styles to their pages. With CSS, developers could then separate the styles, like deciding how all of this will look, from the content, which is essentially all of the text on this page. Of course, that's just HTML and CSS. Then there is JavaScript. JavaScript is a different beast altogether. While HTML and CSS are markup languages, and that is to say, they're only used to describe other documents, JavaScript is a full-on programming language. It allows developers to change the content and the style of a live website. JavaScript has had an interesting history. It was developed in 1995 by a guy named Brendan Eich, and he did it in 10 days. That is crazy. You may not know much about programming now, or maybe you do, but either way, that is an impressive feat. He created JavaScript to run in Netscape Navigator. Today, JavaScript runs in every browser and is one of the most popular programming languages, period, thanks to the popularity of the web. JavaScript runs in a huge number of environments outside of browsers, including servers with software like Node.js and microcontrollers like Tessel.io. All right, and speaking of popularity, it's easy to assume that JavaScript is an offshoot of the programming language Java because of their similar names. Java was hugely popular in 1995, and in fact, it still is today. As it turns out, though, Java and JavaScript are in no way related. I mean, there are a couple syntax similarities, but that doesn't change the fact that the name JavaScript was basically just a marketing decision to piggyback on Java's popularity. True story.